Hello everyone, it's me, Warwick Weston Wright, your annoyingly altruistic sanctimonious git of a communist friend. Subject of today's post is the greatest error in the fight for justice. I don't know if you guys heard that analogy that there's a big difference between mowing down a weed and derooting it. This is kind of appropriate for this post. We're going to open up with a little saying, proverb, which you probably heard from one of my previous posts. Let go of everything you are in order to be all that you can be. For without identity, there is no prejudice or war. And basically, the reason why I'm opening up with this thing to do with identity is related to the post about the fight for justice. Is because identity is used as a manipulation tool to kind of repeat senseless cycles of retaliation, cycles of war, cycle of one empire replacing another one, yada yada yada. We know about lots of cycles, as you know. So I'm going to open up with a little thought-provoking speech. This little speech is to exemplify and try and get you guys thinking about how extremely powerful identity is in blinding people and not being able to see things which are extremely obvious. Okay, now I'm going to repeat something that paraphrase something which George Bush said during his tenure. 2006, I think that's when he was in power. Bush Jr., not Senior. He actually made a speech once. He said, we Americans, we are going to continue the most extreme sanctions against North Korea possible. And the reason we're doing this is because he's a dictator and he starves his own people. Now, this what I've just said, let's divide this speech into two parts. The first part, Bush says, I'm going to continue the most extreme sanctions against North Korea. The second half of the speech is the reason we're doing this is because he's a dictator and he starves his people. Now, the point of this test is you might want to pause the video and really think about what I just said. Because if you actually can't see what's wrong with this speech, it means you're blinded by your identity. Because if I actually said this speech to someone from North Korea, they would see straight away what's wrong with it. So what I'm going to do, pause the video for a sec, really think about that speech, what I said, see if you can think what's wrong with it. And let's see if it's blinded your identity, see if your identity has blinded you. Because there's something extremely wrong with the speech. It's extremely obvious, but people are so blind by their identity that they're unaware of it and how they can be manipulated by it. So, all right, so press the play in the video and we'll explain to you what's wrong with this speech. The first half of the speech says, I am going to continue the most extreme sanctions possible against North Korea. Second half of the speech was, I'm doing this because the guy's a dictator and he starves his own people. Now, what's wrong with that, and you probably didn't see it if you're pro-Western, is that the effects of the most extreme sanctions is to starve the North Korean people. That is actually the effect of the most extreme sanctions. So the United States government has actually confessed openly to actively, willfully starving the North Korean people and then saying we're doing it because the guy's a dictator and he starves his own people. Now, if you didn't see that thing's obvious right in your face, that means you're blinded by your identity. So now you might want to go into some debates, well, he is a dictator, he is wrong, and yada, yada, yada. But this isn't actually the subject of the post. The subject of this matter is that your identity blinded you so much that you couldn't see something which was extremely obvious. And identity has the same effect where you can actually tell people lies that aren't even believable lies and they'll buy it. People have a habit of believing everything that their own media tells them. You know, you get a person on the news and they're reading out this news report. It's all official, look at little news media, in today's news, and they look over into the camera on the other side and read again. And it sounds all simple and perfect, and people tend to buy into it. And because they're blinded by their identity. But anyway, we'll go a bit on. Now, the reason why I've said this about this identity is, like I said, I can't emphasize how important it is, because identity really is a major power of manipulation. Identity is one of the most powerful kind of control tools there is. I mean, to me, I believe the most powerful control tool is beliefs. And basically, this is kind of how it works. Now going into dictatorships, okay, and obviously this is kind of starting to get into the subject now of what the post is about. the greatest error in the fight for justice. All people like fight for justice, and people would like to talk about things and what's wrong in the world, and you get some people that are politically active. I am, as you know, politically active, but in a way where I just like talk about things and post things on YouTube, because I believe my real power as a political activist is my power of persuasion. So I've got some pretty empowering beliefs and philosophies that kind of really thought-provoking. So what I'm going to do right now, the biggest error in the fight for justice, basically all systems of government, pretty much all of them, they have like a one-way flow of power. You've got the power of the political system, and the judicial system has power over the people. But the power of the people over the judges and the politicians is really an illusion, you see. Now, of course, we can vote for people, and you might think that's power over the politicians. But you have to ask yourself, how often in your living memory can you remember a politician fulfilling his campaign promises? You see, so the truth is, there's something missing in all political systems, and that is two-way power. The power for people that aren't in politics, ordinary Joes, regular everyday citizens. We need a system of government, because this is basically, we need a system of government whereby the common people can make real collective votes of no confidence in their leaders and get them out of power immediately before their tenure actually ends. Now, I believe this is the biggest error in the fight for justice, is because people aren't fighting for two-way power. People should be fighting for a political and judicial system that has two-way power, because if we don't fight for that, every other fight we do, you got the Yellow Vest movement going in France at the moment, the Me Too movement, you go back to the 60s, there's the Black Power movement with Jesse, what was his name? I can't remember this, but anyway, there's all these people, all these movements that have gone on throughout the whole world's history, basically. And, we're still living in a world of dictatorships. Now, the thing is, the reason why I talked about dictatorships, about Bush's speech, about Bush accusing North Korea of being a dictatorship, the truth is, we're a dictatorship as well. Like, for example, the President of the United States, they never fulfill their campaign promises, nor do politicians here in England. Now, for me, the definition of a dictatorship is, you might disagree with this, but I think a dictatorship is where the government does things without the consent of the people, or does things directly against the will of the people. To me, that is a dictatorship, which means here in England we have a dictatorship. It's like, for example, the most common example, which applies to every country all over the world. And this has got nothing to do with my being a communist, yeah? We all burn fossil fuels, yes? Do any of us burn fossil fuels of our own free will? Probably not. That means every country in the world is a dictatorship, because anytime people say, stop using fossil fuels, every government of every country in the world also says, sod you, mate, we're going to do it anyway. So you go to a country wants to go to war in Syria. The people say, we don't want it. The government says, sod you, we're going to do it anyway. They didn't want to bomb Libya. The government did it anyway. Sod you, we're going to bomb Libya anyway. Oh, we want you to pull out of Afghanistan. Well, we're not going to pull out from it. Sod you, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to invade Iraq. We the people don't want you to do it. Sod you, we're going to do it anyway. That's a dictatorship. We live in a dictatorship. And people need to understand that, because they're so blinded by their identity that when we talk about like China or North Korea being a dictatorship, we in the West, they totally are. But they're so blinded by our identity, we can't see that we're a dictatorship as well. The old pot calling the kettle black. And this is why identity politics, or identity, is such a powerful manipulation tool, you see. This is why it's really important. So the greatest fight in the fight for justice is that we need to fight for things in the right order. Like, for example, if those Yellow Vest movements made a movement, rather than fighting for what they're fighting for, instead they fight for a political system of two-way movements of power, then the Yellow Vest movement would actually do better. As a matter of fact, every movement would do better. Almost everything that people fight for will probably achieve. So people need to prioritize and fight for things in the right order. We need to fight for this system of government, because if we don't get it, all of us are going to be living in dictatorships for the rest of the world until we destroy our planet and kill ourselves. This is what we need to fight for. Another philosophy I have. It's a little green peace philosophy. I believe you've got to fight for the peace before you get the green. These green peace fighters, they've done so many things which they think they've made progress. The governments give us the illusion that these freedom fighters have made progress, but they've actually never made progress at all. Give you an example, in England recently, they started charging 5p for the carrier bags in the shops. Now, sociologists have done like a little study of the correlation between available resources and manufacturing. And the correlation between resources and manufacturing is almost absolute. Whatever resources there are mined and used. Now, after they passed this kind of law to make people pay for bags, that correlation between manufacturing and resources of plastic bags remained the same. So what that means is, what those numbers mean is that we stopped using as many plastic bags, but they just sold other plastic products instead. So we actually achieved nothing. All we did is put 5p in the pockets of rich people, made them richer and made ourselves poorer, and actually achieved nothing. Because this is an example, you have to fight for the peace before you can have the green. Green's not going to make any progress at all until you get the peace. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, I know that we've started getting hybrid cars and things like that now, but that isn't actually because green pieces have actually made progress. It's because the fuel resources aren't enough to kind of fuel the whole world now. So they're actually making hybrid engines so they can still control people with fuel. That's actually why they've done it. They haven't done it for the right reasons. They'll give you the idea that you've done it for the right reasons, but they haven't. So you've got to stop being manipulated by these things. We need to fight for two-way power in political systems. That's what you need to fight for. We've got to fight for that first. Also, I'm going to go into another little saying here, which is also to do with this post. The best time, this is something I said in a previous post, the best time to improve an environment is when the balance of power shifts. Clarification, only correct beliefs can stop destructive cycles. Now, with this, what I'm saying here is at the moment in the world, I've noticed that the balance of power in the world is actually shifting from the United States to Russia. Now, being a bit of a commie and a fan of Putin, I'm glad that's happening, but I'm not blinded by my identity as a commie or someone that likes Putin, because in Russia they also don't have a system of politics of two-way power, which means all that's going to happen is that unless Putin brings in this type of power, Russia will just become the next empire. And I don't want to see that. I want to see democracy in the world. I don't want to see another empire. There's so many census cycles because Genghis Khan's empire evolved into the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Empire evolved into the Russian Empire, and in the West you had the Roman Empire turned into the English Empire turned into the American Empire, and the cycle just continues and continues and continues senselessly. And the reason why I think is why it's very important for me to say this now, because when I actually said this saying about the best time to improve an environment is when the balance of power shifts, is because when the balance of power shifts, this is when the premonition or context of imperialism is at its most vulnerable. It's a time when imperialism can really truly die. So imperialism at the moment is at its weakest point, and it's the most important time for us people to fight. And I want you people to fight for the right things, get your priorities right, fight for two-way power systems in politics and the judicial systems first. That has to be priority. If you don't get that, everything else will just be identity politics and retreating the senseless cycle of retaliation and using identity to manipulate good people into killing other good people for the benefit of bad people, and that's really got to stop. So I'm going to close that speech there for time. And also, it's not totally related to this post, but you notice I used the word cycles a lot in this post. Funny enough, I've been quite inspired recently. I played this video game. Have any of you guys ever heard of a video game called Skyrim? There's a little free add-on for it at the moment called Enderal. It's spelled Enderl. So if you guys got Steam, if you download Enderl for it, it's actually a role-playing game. It's got a system, it's got a storyline, and it's a whole virtual world, this game. And in the political world, it actually talks about this thing called the cycle. The whole game is surrounded around this thing called the cycle and the cleansing. And the political system is quite interesting. You guys get to play this game because I was quite inspired by it. One of the reasons why I'm making this post is because I was inspired by the storyline of this video game. So if any of you guys, as a matter of sub-interest, if you want to download that game of your game, download it and play it. It's pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to close with my normal annoying saying, my favourite philosophy, which I'm been spreading quite a lot now. A person's beliefs and a person's nature go hand in hand. as do a person's nature and their will. But most importantly, the beliefs, nature, and will of the collective generate the very reality in which we all live. Only correct beliefs can set us free. So with that, I will say goodbye, God bless, and thank you very much for listening to my post.